Good afternoon. My name is Mark Maynard, and I am pleased to welcome you to the Washington Labs Academy webinar series. We hope you find the next hour useful and informative. We have developed this monthly International Approvals webinar series to deal with some of the technical and administrative issues that our customers face when obtaining global marketplace product approvals for their electronics and electrical devices. We recognize that compliance engineering and certification challenges can be complex, and we're always looking for ways to support our customers. Before we begin, I want to go over a few housekeeping details. First, I hope everyone can see the title slide on your computer, and we have muted everyone's microphone to keep the meeting quality as high as possible. The recording of the presentation is underway and will be sent out to all attendees. A full screen view may be preferred. Just select View and Full Screen, and then use Escape to return to the normal view. We encourage questions during the presentation. You can submit a question by enabling the chat or Q&A icon located at the top or side of your screen and typing your question to the host. We will go through the questions at the end of the presentation as time permits. We'd like to hear from you. You can see contact information here, and at the end of the presentation, please reach out via email to academy@wll.com or to me directly. I estimate this presentation will take about 45 minutes, including some time for questions at the end. I work at Washington Labs as the training manager and business development manager. I also have a dual role ACB, or American Certification Body. I have 30 years experience in compliance engineering and RF engineering, and I've worked in the areas such as EMC, EMI, wireless telecom, product safety, design for the environment, and quality management systems. I'm a senior member of the IEEE and immediate past president of the Product Safety Engineering Society, and I'm always active with the annual IEEE EMC Society Symposium. Just to give a little credit before we get started, the meat of the presentation, all the maps, flags, and country demographic information you're seeing here are courtesy of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency World Factbook. It's a open source site as long as you give them credit, and that's what I'm doing here, giving credit for this information I'm using in the presentation today. So we're going to go through a little bit of introduction on the Middle East, and then we're going to take a look at the 16 countries that we're covering. Then we talk about the GCC Standard Organization. You may have heard of this GSO mark, which became a requirement in April of last year. And then we'll talk about some conclusions and recommendations on this area. So the 16 countries we're going to go through today are listed here. Now, if you look at a grouping of Middle East, some authors may use different groupings. I'm just trying to put them together from a cultural perspective, the ones that are share the same language and religions, and the people are kind of grouped together based on that. And my experience in dealing with the Middle East approvals, these are the kinds of groupings I'm typically used to seeing, but you may have been looking at different ones before. And so, just overall, the Middle East, it's very resource-rich in terms of petroleum, natural gas. Finance and banking is one of the areas they've been really diversifying into. You're seeing more and more high-tech startup trying to incubators for new technologies and things. Israel's really leading the pack on that with their software and a lot of development in the radio arenas. There are a lot of countries building to implement a modern infrastructure. Some are further along than others on doing this, getting their internet backbone installed in the country. And there's a very large demand in this market for computer equipment, the IEEE information technology equipment, and other electronics. However, there are certain areas of instability and conflict can create some additional hardships if you're trying to export your products to these regions. So some extra diligence may be required in making sure you're identifying the right market countries for your products to be in. Let's start off with Turkey. It's on path to become a CE member country, and it's ranked 14th in the world in terms of gross domestic product purchasing power parity, which is a measure a lot of economies use to kind of gauge the economic strength of a country. And when I've got the rankings here, these are ranked against the other 229 countries identified from the World Factbook listing. So that's pretty high up there. The 18th largest population, but the GDP is 14th. That kind of shows you their economic productivity is higher than average. Exports, 34th in the world. Imports, 24th in the world. So they import more than they export. Mobile cellular, a little bit below average, 22nd in the world. But they're ranked 16th in the world for internet, kind of on parity with their population. So a lot of companies consider this a good market for them. So they are on path to become an EU member country. There's still some things to overcome. The recent political troubles they've been having has probably set them back a little bit, but they want to make sure they've got the right type of democratic reforms going on in that country before they're going to get there, but there's not been a date given for when they're going to reach full member status. But nevertheless, it does help us out from a compliance standpoint, because they are accepting the CE mark as proof of compliance, and so they'll accept those, the EMC reports, the product safety reports, the radio equipment director reports. There may be some certain frequencies depending on your products, so they have to make sure that they don't interfere with any of the Turkey's military or emergency channels for the police or fire or other things that they've got set off in the spectrum that are specific to Turkey. But in general, if you've got EU compliance, you can expect to receive approval in Turkey for getting your products in there. Their agency is the Information Communications Technology Authority. They've got a new logo, in case you're used to the old one they used to have. The website address has changed also over the past year. And local rep is required in this country. And local rep is someone that's been authorized by your company with some type of legal document, like here in the U.S. we might use a notarized letter of authority giving someone approval to act on behalf of the company. They don't require test samples typically, and they're going to, like I mentioned, those red test reports. And it takes about 4 to 6 weeks, not counting, that's if you're submitting CE reports. So there's no expiration date on their certificates that they grant. Cyprus is a small island country just south of Turkey, and it's kind of small in terms of GDP. And but it is an EU member country, so that makes it really easy to get your products in there if you've got your EU approvals. So there's no additional cost for certification there. What does make it difficult is some political problems there. They've been, since 1960s, been walled off. There's one part's claimed by Greece and the other part's claimed by Turkey, and so they've got this dividing line there. But nonetheless, if you've got approvals for EU, you're supposed to get all your products in there. And I'm just giving a little bit of the background on here. Their talks have been going on for a long time. I don't know when this is going to be resolved. It's been going on for about 50 years, so I wouldn't put any money on when it's going to end. They did join the EU in 2004, and so members can request membership and all the rights afforded to EU countries, members. Their Spectrum Authority is the Cyprus Telecom Authority, and they've got a website in English. Most of these countries do. There's a few exceptions, but generally a lot of them be in Arabic and English. There's a couple that are in Arabic. We'll touch on those as we reach those countries. So they're going to accept your EU reports outright, just like any other. They're a full EU member country, so it's just like any other country that's a full member of the EU. There are a couple countries. As a U.S. company, we're not allowed to pursue or give any information on approvals for Syria because it's a U.S. embargo country, and this is pretty much a full embargo. There's a few countries on there, that, like North Korea, Syria, Iran, and Cuba, although Cuba is probably coming off of it soon for most of the categories. But if you want more information on this, you can go to these websites I've given you here. These are U.S. government websites. The first one's the U.S. Department of Treasury, and it lists all the sanctioned programs and countries for all the countries under this. And then U.S. Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry Security with the sanction designations, and that gives you a little more on the import-export restrictions that apply there. They do allow certain humanitarian aid, but we're talking about basic food and products like that. Probably not something that electronic products can fall into. Iraq, as they've got a lot to recover from years of conflict in the country, so they've been expanding their IEEE services and things there. So they are expanding mobile cellular coverage, and internet users still lagging behind in terms of the population, but they are a good market for a lot of companies. It has what's called an embargo targeted parties in country. This means specific individuals, like, for instance, anybody linked to any of the terrorist organizations in that country, you're not allowed to sell to. You need to make sure that you've got these specially designated nationals and block persons, this SDN list, that comes from the U.S. Treasury website, which is the link I've provided here. Make sure, and that's why it's so important to have a local rep there that's making sure these products are going to the right people and they're not being shunted off somewhere else. They're not selling to somebody else who's giving them to somebody on these lists. They've got to be verified. Their telecom authority is the Communications Media Commission, and they've got an English language website, and I provided the link here. They do require a local rep. Normally, they're not going to require test samples. They're going to accept your EU RED reports or Radio Equipment Directive, and so with that, it'll take about 6 to 12 weeks, depending on the bureaucracy is still pretty heavy there, and they've got a lot to recover from, so it can vary. Make sure you allow time in your development schedule for those approvals. Iran is another U.S. embargo country, the full embargo, so control of use exports. Dual use exports means anything that could have a military application in addition to a civilian thing. So like a GPS device that used to get around traffic, well, that could also be used for military to, for bombing coordinates or something like that. So that's not going to be allowed. So, and they have specific restrictions on most of these categories of equipment that you're going to find if you go out and look at these web pages from the U.S. Department of Treasury and the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security, which will list all the specific things. You can download the documents that spell out in detail what's prohibited, what's allowed. And in general, for these countries, it's only basic humanitarian, like food and shelter, temporary shelter type things. Lebanon had the years of conflict, but they now seem to be building somewhat. They're not a very large country in terms of the population, but they do have a GDP is a bit higher than average. They import a lot of products. They do have a very good internet infrastructure there, better than average. Mobile cellular use is still catching up, and some of the coverage is not always there, but they're working on that aspect also. It is a targeted party also. There's some bad actors there that you're not allowed to sell to. The list of it from the U.S. government can be found at the same Treasury Department link that I provided here. And make sure that you're selling the right individuals. That's why you need to have a reliable local representatives, making sure that these products are being delivered to who they're sold to and not being shunted off to some illegal party. The Telecom Authority is the Telecommunications Regulatory Authority of Lebanon, and they've got an English language website here. They usually require test samples. Local reps not required, except what I just mentioned from the standpoint of making sure that they're not going to block persons on the do not sell to list. And they'll accept the EU EMC low voltage directive and RED reports as proof of compliance. It usually takes about 6 to 10 weeks, and there's no expiry on those certs. Jordan has been a country that's worked for a long time, had good relations with the U.S. They've got a GDP that's on par with their population. They import more than they export, and they've got a good infrastructure for cellular, mobile applications, and better than average infrastructure for internet. So they're looking for those latest electronics. Their telecom authority is Telecommunications Regulatory Commission. You go to the website, it'll come up in Arabic, but there'll be a block at the top that says English. Click on that, and it'll direct you to the English version of the website. Local rep is required in Jordan, and test samples are typically required. Occasionally they may not if it's a real common, like Wi-Fi or Bluetooth type device, but it's up to the agency to tell you that. And if you're working through a third-party compliance test house, they'll get that information. They'll accept the CE, the EU reports, and usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks. The certs have to be renewed every year. So if you're selling your product after the first year, make sure you get those in. I'd recommend 90 days in advance. Start your renewal application so you don't gap out on your certs and have to stop shipment until you get your new cert. Israel is ranked 55th in GDP per person parity, and you'll notice 97 is large population, so that means their production is a lot higher than average. They export a whole lot, they import a whole lot, and so they're a very good market. Mobile cellular infrastructure is very good there. So is their internet infrastructure, so they're a good market country for electronics and electrical products. 2 agencies you're going to work with there. The Standards Institute of Israel is for EMC and product safety. And they're a CB scheme country member, so they accept those CB scheme reports. They've got an English language website. They do require local rep and in-country testing. For proof of compliance, they may allow some, depending on the complexity of the device, they may allow you to submit some EU reports as backing documentation for their seal load and tested. They're real sticklers for the frequency spectrum with their military and emergency channel concerns that they have there. So they have their own approval. It's not just a rubber stamp on a CE report. They're going to do their own testing. And it takes about 6 to 8 weeks, no expiry date on the certs, and that means as long as the product doesn't change, you don't have to get a new cert. But if there's significant change, and that'll be up to the agency to decide what that is, then you'll have to reapply. Their telecom authority is Ministry of Communications. They've got an English language website, and they do require a local rep. Don't generally require test samples. They're going to accept those EU red reports. And it takes about 6 to 8 weeks. Certs are good for 5 years, and I know a lot of products 5 years is they're already end of life. But if they're not, about 90 days prior to that 5 years, you're going to continue selling that product. You need to get the updated certificate. Egypt is ranked 22nd in GDP PPP and 14th largest population, almost 100 million people there. They export less than they import, and they've got a very good infrastructure for cell phone uses. That's probably the main communication. Pretty good infrastructure for internet also. So they're definitely, one of these latest devices. The social media there during their spring uprising, the Arab Spring a while back was very instrumental. But some of that has been cracked down on. So they're always looking for the latest electronics devices there. Their telecom authority is National Telecommunications Regulatory Authority, NTRA. They do have an English language website. They don't require a local rep, and they only require in-country testing for telecom products. This means, hardwired, hooks up to the telephone exchange system, the central office equipment, those types of devices. And so they're not talking about radio frequency devices here. They'll accept the EU CE reports. And as proof of compliance, it takes about 8 to 10 weeks, and there's no expiry dates on those certs. So as long as the product doesn't change, you can keep shipping it on the same one. Kuwait, sandwiched right between Iraq and Saudi Arabia, ranked 57th in the GDP PPP, even though it has a small population of less than 3 million. Very productive country, economically powerful, a lot of oil there, so they export a lot, import less than they export, and they've got a real good infrastructure, relatively speaking, for mobile cellular and internet. So if you're going to the Middle East widespread, it'll probably be a country that you include in there. Telecom authority there is the Ministry of Communications. They do have English language website. They also have a safety agency. It doesn't apply to everything, but industrial equipment, medical equipment, cords, and power supplies are probably going to have approval. Don't require a local rep. Test samples generally aren't required, and they'll accept your EU reports as proof of compliance. Certs are good for a year, so you're going to continue selling after the first year. You got to get it renewed. Saudi Arabia, probably the largest market there for most companies that are selling in the Middle East. 16th in terms of GDP, PPP, and 47th largest population, so they're economically doing really well. And a lot of oil reserves, a lot of gas. They've been diversifying to a lot of financial and other technology companies, things like that. And, so exports 22nd in the world, so they export more than they import, and really good infrastructure for mobile cellular and internet, both. So they're a good market country to be in. Their telecom authority is the Communications and Information Technology Commission. It covers both EMC, EMI, and radio equipment directive aspects of it, and they'll accept either SEC or EU reports. And they have an English language website. They don't normally require test samples, don't require a local rep. They do have a product safety agency, but in a minute here we're going to talk about the GSO mark, which has taken over a lot of the product safety attributes, but this is still their agency that is a member of the GSO for as far as setting those things, those standards for these GSO member countries. So electronics, electrical products, and so that's the SASO, or the Saudi Standards Metrology and Quality Organization, and they don't require local reps or test samples, and they'll take the IC, CB reports, their member country, the CB scheme, and it takes about 6 to 10 weeks, and the certs are good for a year, renewed annually. But that's been taken over, as mentioned, by the GSO. Bahrain is ranked 99th in GDP, PPP, and it's outsized in relation to their population. They export more than they import, and they've got a a little bit below average mobile cellular structure there, a little bit better in the internet, but it is a wealthy country there relative to the size. They've got the Telecommunications Regulatory Authority as their telecom authority there, and website. I believe this is one of those that was only in Arabic. Hopefully they will have an English version, but in the meantime, probably going to have to rely on a partner there. They're going to accept those EU reports as proof of compliance. Takes about 6 to 8 weeks of approval, and the certs are good for 3 years. If you're going to be selling your product after 3 years, then you need to get those renewed. Qatar is ranked 53rd in GDP, PPP, and relative to having the 143rd largest population, you see economically they're doing, really outsized there. They export more than they import, mainly petroleum products and mobile cellular. Relative to the population is better than average, and so is their internet infrastructure. So their telecom authority is the Ministry of Transport and Communications. It's changed the name in the last few years if you were familiar with one before. They do have an English language website, and that should be the MOTC website now. The previous one was the Information and Communications Technology Agency now. It's the Ministry of Transport and Communications. Don't require local reps or samples. They're going to accept those EU red reports as proof of compliance. Takes about 6 to 8 weeks, and there's no expiry date on the certificates. United Arab Emirates, or UAE as it's typically designated, is ranked 33rd in GDP, PPP, And relative to their population of 6 billion, that's really outsized. They produce a lot economically, mainly oil exports, petroleum exports, and they import a lot too. And have a little bit below average mobile, cellular, and internet infrastructure, but they are one of the countries that's really working to improve that. So they're a good market country for a lot of people in that region. Their telecom authority is Telecommunications Regulatory Authority. They do have an English language website. They do require a local rep. Certain types of equipment, such as iPads and those types of things, or GSM devices, broadband, are going to have in-country testing, but otherwise they'll accept the EU Red reports. And takes about 6 to 10 weeks, and certs are good for 3 years. Yemen is ranked 101st in GDP PPP, and it's 48th largest population, 28 million. So you know that's kind of indicates a low economic output. They've been involved with civil war and strife for a while now. Their exports are down at 173rd, imports 126, so they're not doing too well economically. This is one of those countries you probably really need to look at if you want to be involved there, because there is, you know, dangers involved from the ongoing conflicts, armed conflicts there, and it's just something you need to look at to make sure it's worth the rewards outweigh the risk. They are a embargo targeted parties country. That means you've got to avoid selling to any people on the specially designated nationals and block persons list that's issued by the Department of the Treasury in the United States. And make sure you've got local distributors and representatives there that are getting it to the right people, and they're not being side shipped off to some designated person that it should be going to. Their telecom authority is the Ministry of Telecommunications Information Technology. And I've got the website there. It's a very long name, but you can click on that. A local rep is not required. Test samples aren't required. They'll accept the EU Red reports as proof of compliance. Usually takes about 6 to 10 weeks, and then those certs are good for a year. Oman is down in the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula, and on the east side. It's ranked 68th in GDP PPP, and compared to their population having the 132nd largest in the world, that shows that they're outsized economically. They export more than they import, and they've got a kind of below average mobile cellular and internet usage, but once again, this is one of those countries that's trying to expand that, so they're a good market for a lot of electronics related to telecom and you know, internet backbone, wireless cell towers, and those kinds of things. Their telecom authority is the Telecommunications Regulatory Authority, and they have an Arabic website, so you're going to have to rely on, you know, somebody can translate that for you in some cases. They do require a local rep. Test samples aren't required. They may, in a special new technology, want to look at it, but they accept EU, CE reports, you know, red reports. Takes about 6 to 8 weeks, and their certs don't expire as long as the product doesn't change. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the GCC Standardization Organization. That's the Gulf Cooperation Council Standardization Organization. I was always told you're not supposed to use acronyms inside of an acronym, but I guess nobody got the word to them. So it's these, look at this map here, the purple ones are the full members of the Gulf Cooperation Council. And then they have this program, the GCC Standardization Organization for approvals. Yemen is added to that list because they are in the process of becoming full GSO member, but in the meantime, if it's got GSO approval, Yemen will accept that as proof of compliance. And this covers EMC and product safety. They still haven't, you know, aligned all their wireless telecom frequency tables and everything, so still going to have to see some of those for that, and it doesn't cover everything, but it's a process they started in 2005. They've really designed it to be like the EU, you know, CE mark system, But after April 1st of last year is when it became a requirement, and so if you're selling that region, hopefully you're familiar with it and your products have already got approval for it. But if you're thinking about entering this market, this is one of the things you've got to do. So they, as I said, it's based on the EU model, so they're going to have the same standardized conformity assessment procedures for conformity assessment, where they got, the standards, IEC standards that you're tested for EMC and product safety and those kind of things. And then you're going to have an independent third-party certification. They call them notified bodies, but it's not the same. If you're a European Union notified body, that doesn't mean you're a GSO notified body. You've got to be accredited by the GSO organization as a notified body. And they issue Declaration of Conformity, and that's for the GSO. Don't confuse that with the EU Declaration of Conformity. And then they have a G mark, and there's a sample of it here. It has a barcode, which is contained on the certificate, or you can get it from your notified body. And then the the marking that's shown here, and then below that G mark is what they're calling it there. You're going to have the certificate number that's shown there, where I have sample number. And then post-market surveillance, just like the EU, you have market surveillance activities where they're going to go out and buy one or get one off the factory floor, make sure it's still being built like it was as the samples show or the reports show, with all the right components and the right frequencies and everything. They'll do risk assessments on it and see if there's any possible issues. If there's a customer complaint, they'll follow up on that. If there's any incidences like the fire or people getting hurt, they're going to investigate that. So it's just like structurally the EU system. So the scope, you'll probably recognize this from the EU also. So any AC voltage from 50 to 1,000 volts AC, anything that runs off DC from 75 to 1,500 volts DC is in the scope, with the exceptions of medical equipment, equipment using explosive atmospheres, elevator parts, electrical utility members, and then they have planes, trains, and ships. It's made specifically for that. Not if it could be used on, but it's something specific to avionics or maritime equipment or to the railway equipment. So the main categories looking at low voltage equipment and appliances. So, all the ITE stuff that uses low voltages and is going to be covered within there. LVD type stuff. If you have an LVD report for EU, you're going to need it for, this also. So the other category, energy efficiency, medical devices, they have a special category for that. Then cosmetics, construction, materials, machinery, and toys. So list one in the two categories they have is things with low level risk. So they're considering, low voltage equipment is probably going to be in there, but list two has got a higher level risk. It's going to require that third party notified body approval from a GSO notified body. So those categories are listed here. So you see a lot of appliances, washers, dryers, refrigerators, toasters, food processing equipment, hair dryers, heaters, microwave ovens, cookers. So a lot of things there. So you'll see that list two doesn't include ITE, but what it does include is plug sockets, adapters, port extension sets, battery chargers. So a lot of IT equipment, is going to have those plugs and sockets. You got to make sure you've got approved ones that you're using with your products. And the submittal documents for the GSO is just like you would expect for the EU. You're going to have that, except they've got their own application form. You've got to identify which of the specific GCC countries you're shipping to, what the HS codes for the equipment are, that's the harmonized standard codes, and then the basic agreement contract with the notified bodies. So if you're whatever the GSO notified body you're using, you've got to have a contract in place with them, saying that you're going to adhere to what they say you've got to do for your products and stuff like that, and accountable. So the safety EMC reports, as I mentioned, it's probably the same standards that you're using in the EU, but your notified body will be able to tell you that. Detailed equipment photos, just like any submittal, the voltage and amperage ratings on the product label. Any warning labels on the equipment must be in Arabic. Instruction manual must be provided both Arabic and English, and then the technical instruction documents you normally send, mechanical drawings, schematics, circuit blocks, block diagrams, those kind of things that you usually do with most submissions, like, the EU, FCC, you're familiar with that. And the AC plug certification, if applicable, meaning if it has AC plug, you've got to be using a GSO-approved, plug or socket or whatever the case is. So once you've got all that, the timelines we've been seeing is the typical 6 to 8 weeks on the approvals. So we went through a lot today, but as I mentioned, it's usually a good market for a lot of companies, large infrastructure projects. A lot of these that don't have a real robust internet and mobile cellular infrastructure are looking to increase that and buying a lot of fiber and cable and other things, along with the equipment to support all that. Server farms and all the things you need to really increase the technology in those countries. And there's a growing telecom market also, as I mentioned. So you got to have reliable, knowledgeable partners there, especially for those ones you're dealing with that have targeted embargoes. Make sure you're staying within the requirements and don't get yourself in trouble with any of the U.S. regulators for products ending up in the hands of people or countries they're not supposed to go to. You don't want products being sent to one country and being diverted to Syria or Iran in violation of those U.S. laws. Regulatory requirements change a lot. Since the last time we gave this presentation about a year ago, a couple agencies had name changes, website changes, so you've got to really keep up with this. And I know there's going to be more updates to the GSO scheme as they get more and more things harmonized and aligned and get more product categories added into there. And so they'll be more like an EU system where one approval will get you into all those countries. And as I mentioned with a couple of these, make sure the risk versus rewards weighs out. That if you're going to a country that's having armed conflict, it may not be worth it with the additional products that you've got and personnel issues that you could put at risk by having presence there. So for questions, I'm going to take a look and see what we've got here. Don't look like I've got, okay, I just got one here. So I've got many countries accept CE report, which countries do not accept CE or FCC reports. For instance, as I mentioned, Israel is one of them. The majority of the rest of them will accept CE reports. There's a couple like Saudi Arabia that will also accept FCC reports and certifications from FCC. So those have got to go as a package. So it just depends. Within this presentation, I've got all those listed out for each country, and you'll be getting a PDF copy with this along with a link to the recording of this. So if you want to share that with your colleagues or go back over it later, you'll have that opportunity. Okay, and then I'm looking for Q&A. Is ECAS mark required for IT products? I'm not sure what that's ECAS is. I'll have to find that is maybe an energy requirement or something like that. I didn't cover specifically today, but I'll look that up and get that sent out with the other information. It looks like all the questions we had today under the chat and Q&A categories. Thank you for joining me here today. I appreciate all the enthusiasm for the upcoming ones we've got, and I also want to let you know next, if you need to get in contact with any additional questions, you can contact me at markm@wll.com, and if you've got a project you need to get started for Middle East or anywhere else, you can use this email address here, info@wll.com, the phone number, and our website to get started. Next week, I'm going to be in San Jose at the Product Compliance Engineering Symposium that's put on by the IEEE Product Safety Society. I'll be making a few presentations there. If you're in that area and want to go, you can go to the website here and look at it. That's PSES for Product Safety Engineering Society Symposium.org. And then in end of July, there's the EMC Symposium that's going to be in Long Beach. There is an international EMC Symposium in Singapore that's happening, I believe it's the week after next. But if you're like me and can't afford to go to Singapore, then you'll be at Long Beach. And so you can see more information there at the EMC 2018 USA.emcss.org for more information. Hope you're able to join us throughout the summer. And June, we're going to have Central America and the Caribbean Compliance Overview on June 14th. And on July 12th, it's going to be South American Compliance Overview. And then August 9th, we'll be going over China Compliance. You can see the full schedule for the rest of the year. And I think we're starting to post ones for 2019 also on the Washington Labs Academy website, found at the URL listed here. Thank you for joining me today. If you've got suggestions for any type of international approval webinar you'd like to see, please send those to me so I can develop one and get it out to you. If there's, as mentioned, if you need any additional information, please contact me. And if there's anything you missed or I wasn't clear on, I'd be glad to hear from you. And we'll check you next month. Thank you.